The dog stopped dead in its tracks. Ears flat, eyes locked forward, muscles trembling. Deputy Lane Thorne had seen his K9, Bishop, charge into gunfire. But now, the shepherd stood guard at the base of a gnarled elm like it was sacred ground. Anyone who stepped close got a low, guttural growl and warning. No one had touched the roots. Not yet. And then Bishop began to dig, slow, methodical, almost reverent. The first scoop of earth revealed a flash of fabric. Children's size. Something faded blue. 3 years missing. And now, finally, the ground was giving up its secret. The morning mist hadn't lifted by the time Deputy Lane Thorne pulled off the gravel road and parked at the edge of Old Finch Hollow. His boots crunched on wet leaves as he stepped out. Bishop leapt from the back of the cruiser, sniffing the air before sitting at Lane's side, alert, still. The trees were dense here, thick-barked, twisted things, branches heavy with rot. Even the light seemed reluctant to filter through. A barbed wire fence, long since rusted and sagging, half-ringed the hollow. It used to mark the edge of the Whitaker property, back when anyone still dared call it theirs. Lane checked the address, scratched on the call sheet again. 1360 South Briar Road. Strange odor near the tree lean. Something's dead. No name attached. Just a woman's voice on the line. Shaky, anxious to hang up. "Let's work," Lane muttered, and Bishop sprang forward, nose low to the damp ground. They'd been partners for years now. Lane trusted the dog more than most people, certainly more than the brassback in town. Bishop didn't lie. He didn't make excuses. When he locked onto something, it mattered, and today he locked up fast. 20 yards into the woods, the shepherd's whole body stiffened like he'd hit an electric fence. No sound, no bark, just a rigid stare at the base of a large elm. Its bark was split deep and dark near the bottom, as if lightning had scarred it long ago. Bishop growled. Low, possessive. Lane moved slowly, one hand on a sidearm, the other gently resting on Bishop's harness. The dog didn't move, didn't budge. "All right," Lane murmured. "What the hell's got you acting like this?" He took one step forward. Bishop snapped. Not at him. Not a bite, but a sudden bark, explosive and warning, teeth bared. He planted himself in front of the tree, guarding it like something sacred. Or cursed. Lane had seen this once before. Back in Houston. A cadaver dog guarding a storm drain, where a runaway's body had been stuffed with old blankets and rot. "Easy," he whispered, pulse ticking. He radioed it in. Deputy Thorne requesting backup and a forensic unit. Possible 10 to 68. Repeat, possible 10 to 68 at South Briar. K9 has a hit. Static crackle back, followed by dispatch's thin voice. "Copy that." Who made the initial report? No name. Just a tip. There was a pause. "We'll send someone. Hold perimeter." He crouched beside Bishop, who now stared down at the base of the tree. His paw hovered, waiting for permission. Lane gave a small nod. "Okay, go." Bishop began to dig. The first thing uncovered was cloth. Faded denim. Dirt-stained, fraying at the edges. A pocket with a unicorn patch barely hanging on. Lane's stomach clenched. He'd seen that patch before. It was in the file. The Olivia Marin file. 3 years ago, 7-year-old Olivia walked into the woods behind her grandmother's house after dinner and never came back. Search parties combed Finch Hollow. Bloodhounds, helicopters, volunteers. Nothing. Until now. He took 2 steps back and dropped to a crouch, suddenly winded. His throat felt dry. He swallowed hard. Bishop stood over the shallow hole now, unmoving, staring down like he was mourning. Then a voice behind him. "You're not supposed to be here." Lane turned sharply, hand flying to his weapon. A woman stood behind the rusted fence line. Thin frame, too pale skin, hair the color of smoke tied back in a ragged bun. She wore a canvas coat too big for her. Mismatched boots. Her eyes looked haunted. "I called it in," she said. Lane kept his hand on his sidearm. "Name?" "Sadie Whitaker." She glanced toward the tree. That's my family's land. Used to be." Lane lowered his hand. Slowly. "You're Ray Whitaker's daughter?" She nodded. I haven't used a name in years. Why now? Why call in today? Sadie didn't speak for a long moment. Her eyes lingered on the disturbed soil. Because I finally remembered where the smell was coming from. Lane's brow furrowed. You knew? I was here the night she disappeared. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what I saw back then. Or maybe I did. I just didn't want to admit it. She stepped forward, but Bishop barked sharply, halting her in place. He won't let anyone near it, Lane said. Not even me. Sadie's lip trembled. He's smart. Lane radioed again for forensics, then guided Sadie back toward the road. Start talking. Inside the cruiser, Sadie sat shivering despite the August heat. Her hands trembled in her lap. Lane passed her a bottle of water, unscrewed. You said you were here, the night Olivia disappeared. Sadie nodded slowly. I was 15. My dad wasn't well. He drank. Got mean when he did. Lane had heard the rumors. Ray Whitaker had vanished 2 years ago. Left town, never called. No one missed him. That night, she whispered, I was out past curfew. My dad was already shouting when I came home. I tried to sneak in, but I heard a car, not ours, someone else's, near the back shed. It had rained earlier. I could smell wet dirt. I remember hearing a thump. She squeezed the bottle, knuckles white. I saw him carrying something, wrapped in a blue blanket. Small, too small. You think it was Olivia? Sadie's breath hitched. I think I've always known it. Lane studied her. And you said nothing? I told my grandmother. She told me not to say a word. Said it would ruin everything. Said there was no proof. I was just a scared kid. I believed her. Lane's jaw tightened. And now, my grandmother died last week. That's what brought me back. I found something in her attic, my old sketchbook. I'd drawn the tree, the one he buried her under. The forensic team arrived at dusk. 2 techs in white suits moved in slow silence as they sifted through the dirt Bishop had exposed. The root system of the elm was thick, gnarled, and ancient, and coiled around something soft and sunken. A small skull was lifted from the earth just after dark, delicate, cracked. A single gold earring still clung to the bone. Lane stood back, watching, Bishop at his side. The lab would confirm it, but he already knew. Olivia Marin had been found. And now, there were questions no one could avoid. Back in the cruiser, Sadie watched the text in a daze. He killed her, she murmured. I think my father killed her. Lane didn't answer. She turned to him. What happens now? We exhume the remains, run DNA, reopen the case. There'll be interviews, records pulled. We track Ray. If he's alive, we bring him in. Sadie stared back at the tree. What if he's dead? Then we follow the evidence anyway. She looked tired. Years of guilt had settled into her bones. Do you think I could have saved her? She asked. Lane was quiet for a long beat. I think, he said, you just did. But not everyone was ready to believe the story Sadie had told. Not Marge Marin, Olivia's mother, who showed up the next morning with shaking hands and whiskey on her breath. Not the neighbors who whispered about Sadie's past. The girl with the wrong friends, the quick temper, the broken home. And not Lane's own sergeant, who sat across from him at the precinct with narrowed eyes and said, You really think Ray did it? Just like that? After 3 years. I believe my dog. And I believe Sadie's not lying. Well, the sergeant said, leaning back, maybe it's time to ask why Sadie waited so long. And why the hell her sketchbook just happened to survive a decade in an attic. Lane said nothing, but the question wouldn't leave him alone. That night, as he lay in bed, the image of Sadie's face, pale, unreadable, stayed with him. So did something else. The way Bishop hadn't growled when she stepped forward the second time, as if somehow the dog had decided she belonged near that tree after all. It rained the next morning. Not a hard rain, just enough to smear the soil and fog the windows of Deputy Lane Thorne's cruiser. He sat alone at the trailhead to Finch Hollow, parked beneath the same drooping sycamore where the missing posters for Olivia Marin used to hang. The staples were still embedded in the bark, rusted over with time. No one had bothered to pull them out. Bishop rested in the back seat, head low between his paws, ears twitching as the windshield wipers thumped. Lane hadn't slept. Not really. Too many loose ends. Too many questions Sadie hadn't answered. The sketchbook, the timing, the silence for 3 years. And most of all, the fact that Ray Whitaker hadn't been seen since just after Olivia vanished. Gone but not reported. Not by his daughter. Not by his mother. Not by anyone. That didn't sit right. At the sheriff's office, the forensic lab's preliminary report had come in by fax. Victim, juvenile, female. Estimated age at death, 6 to 8 years. Time and ground, 2.5 to 3.5 years. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to occipital lobe. Clothing remnants consistent with missing child Olivia Marin. DNA comparison pending. Lane set the paper down. There was no question anymore. Olivia had been murdered. She hadn't wandered off and gotten lost in the woods. Someone had struck her, hard, and then buried her beneath the roots of a tree, like she was nothing. And now, someone was trying to stay ahead of the truth. By noon, Lane drove to the last known address listed for Ray Whitaker in county records, a crumbling shed house on the far side of Lakeside Junction, half swallowed by vines and kudzu. The place stank of old oil and mouse droppings. A rusted lawnmower leaned sideways in the mud. Nobody answered the door. Inside, Lane found dust-coated furniture, newspapers from 2022, and 2 unpaid power bills stacked on the table. A yellow sticky note was stuck to the refrigerator. Sadie's last visit. Do not open. Not ready. The fridge was sealed shut with duct tape. Lane stood still, listening. No buzz. No hum. No power. He sliced through the tape with a pocket knife. Inside was meat, rotten, wrapped in old wax paper and garbage bags. And on the middle shelf, a glass mason jar. Label peeled off. Inside, a clump of hair. Blonde, matted, molded to the jar's inner surface like algae on stone. Lane stepped back, swallowing bile. He bagged the jar and called in the evidence van. The next person Lane went to see was Marge Marin. Olivia's mother answered the door in a stained robe, a cigarette hanging from her lip. Her eyes were small red, dull with years of grief and gin. "You found her," she rasped. "Didn't you?" "We did," Lane said gently. Marge didn't cry. She turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open behind her. Lane followed. "She was a good girl," Marge mumbled. "Didn't deserve what she got." "No, ma'am." She looked over her shoulder. "I always said it was an accident. She didn't just wander off. I told everyone, but they said I was being dramatic. Even Sadie. She was at the house that night." Lane blinked. "Sadie Whitaker was at your house?" "Yeah, for dinner. I let her stay sometimes. Her old man was a bastard, and she was always half-starved. Olivia liked her." Lane's chest tightened. "What time did she leave?" Marge looked up. "I dunno. 9:10? It was raining. My ex was passed out on the couch. Sadie walked Olivia back to her grandma's. Said she'd be fine." "You're saying Sadie was the last one to see Olivia alive?" Marge's mouth twitched. "I guess I am." The ground shifted beneath Lane after that. He returned to the station, pulled the file again, laid it all out on the table. The timeline never made sense. Olivia was seen alive at 9:15 p.m. Sadie said she saw her father carrying something around 10:30. But Sadie never mentioned being at Marge's. Never mentioned walking Olivia back. That was a major omission. He stared at the sketchbook photo Sadie had shown him. The drawing of the tree. The way she said she just remembered it last week, when her grandmother died. But she'd been the last one to see Olivia. And now Ray was gone. No body, no trace. Just vanished. Lane's heart started thudding. He printed a photo from the county archive. The Whitakers' backyard, 10 years old. A rusted burn barrel by the back fence. He got back in his cruiser. Sadie answered the door with a look of cautious calm. "I knew you'd come back," she said. "Want to talk about the jar?" Lane didn't flinch. "Hair. Sealed in a fridge. Looks like someone didn't want to pass walking off." Sadie nodded, unsurprised. He was sick, Deputy. Real sick. I think there's more to this, Lane said. And I think you've known a long time. Her fingers curled tightly around the doorframe. You don't understand. Then make me... She hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the house was cold. Too clean, like it had been scrubbed just recently. Something didn't smell right. Bishop sniffed once, then growled, low, confused. Lane followed his lead. He pushed open a door at the end of the hall. A back room. Inside, the old burn barrel from the photo sat in the corner, blackened, warped. He walked toward it, peered in. Ash! Bone fragments. Button. Child-sized. Lane looked at Sadie. What the hell is this? She didn't answer. Did your father even kill Olivia? I didn't mean to, Sadie whispered. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Lane froze. Bishop stiffened beside him. What did you say? Sadie shook her head, tears brimming now. I didn't mean to. I got scared. The story came out in fragments. Olivia didn't want to go home that night. She wanted to stay up late, play with Sadie's necklace. Sadie snapped. It was stupid. A shove, a fall. Olivia hit her head on the firewood stack behind the shed. She didn't move. Sadie panicked, dragged her into the woods, buried her beneath the elm because the roots were soft there. Storm fell just weeks before. Ray came home drunk, found the mud on Sadie's clothes, saw her crying. She confessed, and he covered it up, told her they'd never believe it was an accident. That girls like her, already on probation for shoplifting, already whispered about, didn't get mercy. So he made it worse, burned her things, hid the rest. Then he left town before anyone could start asking the right questions. And Sadie stayed. Lane stared at her, blood thundering in his ears. All this time, he said, I was a kid, and then I wasn't. And by then, the truth was too heavy to carry. Bishop sat down beside him, silent. Sadie stepped forward, hands out. I didn't mean for her to die, but I couldn't live with it anymore. Lane pulled out his cuffs. You're under arrest, Sadie Whitaker. She didn't resist. The confession rocked the town. The locals who once pitted Sadie now call her a monster. Marge Marin collapsed in a diner parking lot when she heard. Smashed a bottle against her windshield, screaming, I fed that girl. I let her sleep in my daughter's room. No one came to the trial. No character witnesses. No letters on her behalf. Even the defense attorney looked haunted. Lane sat in the back, arms crossed, Bishop at his feet. When Sadie pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter, she didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just looked tired. Empty, but even the quietest truths keep echoing. 3 weeks after sentencing, Lane walked the trail back into Finch Hollow. The elm tree had been cut down, the roots pulled up and cataloged by forensic techs. The soil was bare now, disturbed. But Bishop still walked slowly to the spot, still sat there, still stared down like something sacred had once lived there, and maybe still did. Lane crouched beside him, running a hand over the shepherd's back. You knew, he whispered, all this time. Bishop gave a soft whine. At home that night, Lane lit a fire, poured a glass of rye, sat on the porch and watched the wind move through the trees. And then quietly he wept, not just for Olivia, not just for Sadie, but for the unbearable weight people carry, and the way the earth, in time, always remembers, even when everyone else forgets. 6 weeks later, autumn came early. The trees around Finch Hollow turned too fast, sharp bursts of orange and blood red clinging to limbs like bruises. The mornings were damp, the light thin and blue, cold enough that breath fogged in the air even before sunrise. Lane stood on the back porch of the sheriff's office, coffee in hand, watching fog rolling over the cornfields past Route 9. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since Sadie's sentencing. Even Bishop was starting to slow, graying more around the muzzle, stiff in the mornings. The town had gone quiet again. The headlines faded. Olivia Marin's remains had been returned to her mother in a cedar box with no inscription. A small, private burial. No marker yet. Lane had gone. Stood far from the grave, behind the sycamore tree near the back of the lot. No one saw him. He didn't want them to. The Marin case was closed, officially, but some things refused to stay buried. It was Eliza Tibbet, the local librarian, who lit the fuse again. She walked into Lane's office carrying a box wrapped in a plastic shopping bag, her hands trembling. "I didn't know where else to take this," she said. "What is it?" "Donations came in this week." A man dropped off a few crates of old books. Said they were clearing out the Whitaker attic. I opened one, and this was inside. Lane pulled back the plastic. Inside the box, VHS tapes, labeled with dates in black marker. 2018 to 2020. One label read, "Whitaker, basement footage R." Eliza looked pale. "I didn't watch it. I couldn't." Lane nodded. "You did the right thing." He found a player in the evidence room. One of the old TVs from high school lockdown drills, long since retired. The kind with rounded glass screens and static that smelled of melted plastic. He fed the tape in. The screen flickered. At first, nothing but dim footage. A grainy shot of basement. Concrete walls. A string light swaying above a table. A man paced in and out of frame. Then the image settled. Ray Whitaker. Drunker. Older. Talking to himself. Or, not quite. "You shouldn't have gone in the woods," he muttered. "You knew the rules. I told you what happens to bad girls." Lane sat forward. Ray turned to the camera, stared straight into the lens, face twitching. "She cried so much," he said. "You remember that, Sadie? How she cried." Lane's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "I buried her like you asked." Ray whispered, "You don't get to pretend now. You helped." The screen shook as he knocked the camera off its tripod. The rest was static. Lane didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. Then he rewound the tape, watched it again. Every word, every flicker. Ray hadn't left town to protect Sadie. He'd blackmailed her, controlled her with guilt, and more importantly, she hadn't acted alone. Or maybe not at all. By nightfall, Lane drove to Gwen Whitaker's old house. Sadie's grandmother, the woman who died just before the tip call. The attic hadn't been fully cleared, not yet. Boxes of receipts, rotting furniture, old trophies from when Sadie had been on the junior softball team. He pushed deeper, flashlight flicking side to side. In the back corner, a locked cedar chest. Tarnished brass hinges. No key. Lane forced it open with a pry bar. Inside, photos. Dozens. Sadie and Ray. Sadie and Olivia. Candids in the kitchen. One image showed Olivia sitting at the base of the elm tree, arms wrapped around her knees. A second showed Sadie, behind her, holding the same unicorn patch jacket found at the burial site. 3 days before Olivia went missing. The date on the back, August 16th. Olivia had gone missing on August 19th. Someone had taken her clothes before the night she died. Lane stepped back, heart hammering. He drove straight to the prison facility in Bridgewater. Sadie sat behind glass, wearing gray. Her hair was shorter, her eyes sharper. "You came," she said softly. "I watched the tape," Lane said. She didn't blink. "Then you know." "I think I know part of it." She looked down at her hands. Lane leaned in. "Did you kill Olivia, Sadie?" Her eyes lifted. "Would it matter now?" "It matters to me. It matters to her." Sadie swallowed. "I found her crying behind the house. She had bruises. Said my dad scared her, that he made her come to the woods with him sometimes." Lane felt the back of his neck go cold. "I told her I'd protect her," Sadie whispered. "We stayed by the tree. I went inside to get a blanket. When I came back..." She didn't finish. Lane waited. "He said it was an accident," she said finally, "that she fell, that if I didn't help bury her, he'd say I pushed her. He made me carry her." "Dig. You said you killed her." Sadie's voice cracked. "Would you have believed me if I hadn't?" Lane stared at her. "No," he admitted. 3 days later, the medical examiner called. The trauma on Olivia's skull didn't match a fall. It was too clean, too deliberate, consistent with a blow from a flat object, maybe a shovel, maybe wood. Lane drove back to the elm site. No longer a grave, just a hollow space in the earth. Bishop sniffed once, then sat. The air was heavy, like something unfinished was still breathing through the soil. Lane closed his eyes. He filed a report, requested the case be reopened, filed a post-conviction review. He wasn't sure it would change anything. The state rarely reversed, but it was all he could do, and for the first time in weeks, he slept through the night. Spring came late that year. When the thaw finally hit, Lane and Bishop walked the woods again. Finch Hollow felt different, still haunted, but not angry, as if the land had exhaled. They passed the spot where the elm had stood. New grass had begun to grow. Bishop nosed the soil, then turned to Lane, tail swaying just once. Later, Lane visited Olivia's grave. Still unmarked, but cleaner now. Flowers tucked in around the stone border. A small drawing laminated and tucked beneath a rock. Crayon hearts and a stick-figure dog with Jasper written above. Someone remembered. Someone came. Lane stood there for a long time. He said nothing, and when he turned to leave, he looked once more at the tree line. The wind moved through the leaves like a whisper, and it sounded a lot like, "Thank you."